The Galactic Unified Species Council, despite its prestigious name, occupied the most absurdly grandiose structure ever conceived by sentient minds. A towering crystalline edifice that pulsed with hues reflecting the collective moods of its members. It was a building designed to inspire awe, but in reality, it was as gaudy as it was hollow. Its walls shimmered in shades of violet and teal, shifting and swirling according to the emotions of those within. At the moment, the chamber glowed an insufferably smug teal, a color that perfectly matched the council's bloated sense of self-importance. The chamber buzzed with the dissonant clamor of 17 different species trying and failing to speak over one another. A cacophony of clicks, whistles, gurgles, and sounds that could only be described as the auditory equivalent of interpretive dance filled the air. The Galactic Council, in all its inefficiency, prided itself on being the pinnacle of interspecies cooperation. What that truly meant, however, was agreeing to disagree on everything while pretending they'd reached a consensus. Seated at the desk, a monstrosity clearly designed for a species with more than the standard human anatomy, was the human ambassador. The chair had been crafted for beings with 3 buttocks and prehensile tails, making it more akin to an abstract sculpture than a practical seat. Watching the ambassador struggle to find any semblance of comfort had become a spectator sport among certain council members. Representative of Earth, droned Senior Administrator N.X. Harak, an entity composed of sentient gas with an intelligence so dense it approached the singularity of a black hole. Will you adjust to the standard council seating arrangements, or will you submit Form GC1138B for special accommodations? The human ambassador gave that peculiar, almost predatory smile, teeth never showing, the expression more inscrutable than 1,000 unspoken words. At first, the council had taken this gesture as a threat display, but they'd quickly learned it meant nothing more than polite, if uncomfortable, acknowledgement. "Thank you for your consideration, Senior Administrator," the ambassador replied, the faintest tightening of their lips betraying the discomfort they'd refused to show. "I find these accommodations perfectly adequate." Meanwhile, a telepathic ripple of amusement flowed through the Vox Collective, a species known for its hive-mind nature. The collective found humans endlessly entertaining, like particularly clever pets that had learned to use a toilet. 16 months had passed since the Council invited humanity to join their ranks, following Earth's achievement of viable faster-than-light travel. Earth, once considered harmless, was now seen as a potential asset, though many species privately placed bets on how long it would take humanity to accidentally annihilate itself. "And now," announced Premier Zolon, the arachnoid leader with 17 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns, "we shall address item 347B on today's agenda." Zolon froze, then suddenly twitched. It was an old predatory habit, the kind that still made the more skittish council members uncomfortable. The human colony on Proxima Centauri 4 has submitted a petition regarding border security. Again, a collective groan spread through the room. Earth's colonies had been petitioning about border security non-stop for weeks. The human ambassador's eyes tightened slightly, but they offered nothing more than a polite, neutral expression. "Thank you for your patience," they said, their tone still pleasant. "As newcomers to galactic society, we're still adapting to interspecies norms regarding territorial boundaries." What the ambassador didn't say, but every being in the room knew, was that the Devar Commonwealth had been conducting what they called cultural survey expeditions through Earth's borders. These expeditions always seemed to coincide with the mysterious disappearance of Earth's resources and, on occasion, research equipment. Ambassador Grix, the representative of the Mertial Confederacy, a species of overgrown mole rats, let out a dramatic snort, clearly attempting to dismiss the concern. "Perhaps," suggested the Devar representative. Your colony should invest in better tracking systems. Our cultural expeditions are clearly marked in accordance with Council Regulation G 77-79.3, subsection D. The ambassador nodded politely, though internally they were seething. We've studied that regulation extensively, they said, maintaining their neutral tone. Fascinating document. Our reading suggests that advance notice is required for cross-border expeditions. We haven't received any notifications. We've sent notifications, insisted the Devar representative, its sensory tentacles flicking in indignation, or possibly indigestion, which was difficult to tell. Well, the ambassador said, ever the diplomat, perhaps our receivers need calibration to better accommodate your superior technology. A ripple of amusement passed through the Vox collective. A subtle snicker vibrated through the chamber. The human ambassador had perfected the art of turning accusations into compliments so smoothly that no one could even detect it. It was diplomatic alchemy. Premier Zolan's mandibles clicked in irritation, signaling the end of that discussion. The matter of notification protocols will be referred to the Subcommittee on Communication Standards. He glanced down at the next item on the agenda. Moving to item 347-C. As the session dragged on, the human ambassador sat unmoving, listening attentively, maintaining that cool, impenetrable diplomatic expression that had earned them a reputation across the galaxy. They were the only representative who hadn't requested a biological break, and this led to several hypotheses among the Council's biologists about the superior bladder control of humans. The theory about them wearing a collection device? No one dared investigate. And then, just as the session seemed poised to collapse into the usual administrative chaos, a junior attaché slipped a data tablet discreetly into the ambassador's hand. The ambassador's fingers gripped the device for just a moment, their face unchanging, but the slightest tension appeared in their posture. They nodded once to the attaché, a quiet signal to proceed. The unexpected interruption came in the form of an emergency report, which now flashed across the ambassador's screen. They scanned the information quickly, and for the first time, a glimmer of something cold passed behind their eyes. The hum of the council chamber's vibrant energy softened, as if the crystalline walls themselves sensed the subtle shift in the room. Premier Zolan continued to drone on, but the attention of every species in the room was divided. The human ambassador, usually an enigma wrapped in diplomatic poise, was now very clearly focused on something other than the monotonous stream of regulations and petitions. The data tablet in their hands glowed ominously with the latest communication. It was a brief, almost sterile report, but it carried with it the weight of something far more significant than any council agenda could encapsulate. As the ambassador's eyes flickered back and forth across the screen, a quiet ripple of discontent spread among the assembled species. Something was changing, and they could feel it in the very air. The Proxima Centauri 4 situation requires immediate attention. The human ambassador's voice cut through the haze of council chatter. The words, once so carefully measured, now had an edge to them, a quiet sharpness that sent a subtle shiver down the spines of those paying attention. Premier Zolan paused mid-sentence, his 17 eyes blinking rapidly as if trying to process the sudden disruption. He froze in place, caught off guard by the shift in tone. No one, not even the human ambassador, had dared interrupt the flow of the council for such a mundane matter before. The council, after all, had been in session for nearly 5 hours without a single interruption from anyone except the junior staff. But now... The latest report from our colony has come through, Premier, the ambassador continued, their voice smooth and controlled, but there was an undeniable tension behind the words. I've just received confirmation that a significant anomaly has been detected near the colony. A large object. We suspect it's of unknown origin. The entire room fell silent. For a brief moment, even the Vox Collective fell still. The various species exchanged wary glances, their telepathic pulses muted in uncertainty. They knew the ambassador's usual calm was a facade. Something had shifted in them, something hidden beneath that ever-present pleasant smile. "You're suggesting," Premier Zolon began, his voice cold and calculating, "that this anomaly poses a threat to the colony?" The ambassador met his gaze, their expression still unreadable. "We cannot rule it out, Premier. Its size, its trajectory, it's unlike anything we've encountered before." The room buzzed with anxious energy. Representatives from every corner of the council fidgeted, some tapping their appendages nervously, others exchanging rapid private messages. Their collective instinct was to defer, to pass the issue off to a subcommittee. But for the first time, the human ambassador was not waiting for that tired bureaucracy to take its course. Ambassador Grix, the representative of the Myrtile Confederacy, a species that resembled nothing so much as well-dressed mole rats, leaned forward, clearly interested in the development. "What exactly are we dealing with here, Ambassador?" they asked, their whiskers twitching. "How serious is this threat?" "Serious enough that we are requesting the Council's immediate authorization for full defensive measures," the ambassador replied, their words even, but there was a hard edge to them now. The room went still again. Full defensive measures. Earth had yet to fully disclose the capabilities of its military assets, and even in their probationary status, they had been granted only the most basic permissions when it came to security matters. The Council had assumed that humanity, still in its infancy in intergalactic politics, would have little to offer in terms of military might. Yet the ambassador's posture, their unwavering calm, betrayed something else entirely. "This is a matter for the Security Subcommittee to review," Senior Administrator NX Harak interjected, a dense cloud of gas that had once been a great mind of the universe, but it was clear to anyone paying attention that even Harak wasn't as certain as they had been moments ago. "There's no need to rush to such drastic measures. There is protocol, Ambassador. Please allow us to handle it." The ambassador's gaze never wavered. They kept their voice even, their diplomatic mask firmly in place. "You'll forgive me, Senior Administrator, but we've already had the time to handle this. The anomaly has been in our system for over 72 hours now, and we've been monitoring it extensively." The sharpness in the human's voice didn't go unnoticed. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The tension in the chamber grew, and a few council members exchanged uneasy glances. It was not just the words themselves, it was the implication behind them. This wasn't the first time humanity had faced an urgent threat. It was clear that Earth was capable of taking matters into its own hands, but the Council had yet to see how far that would go. "I will make it clear once more," the ambassador continued, their tone unyielding. "The object in question is moving toward Proxima Centauri 4, and I'm afraid that I cannot in good conscience sit here and allow this situation to unfold without taking action." The Council's collective eyes turned to Premier Zolon, who was now visibly tense, his mandibles clicking in an erratic pattern. The weight of the ambassador's words seemed to be sinking in. "Ambassador," he began, his voice now laced with cautious deliberation. "This is an emergency situation, certainly. But military action without Council approval is what's necessary," the ambassador interrupted smoothly, cutting him off. The shift was sudden and subtle. Gone was the deferential diplomat, replaced by something colder, sharper. A leader not seeking permission but delivering a decision. "In light of the impending threat to the colony, and the fact that the Council has failed to act swiftly enough, I am invoking Article 157 of the Membership Charter." There was a pause as the room digested the significance of the statement. The human was invoking a clause that allowed for unilateral defensive action in extreme cases without Council authorization. It was a clause that had never been used before. Ambassador Grix leaned back, the expression of the Myrtle representative shifting from one of curiosity to genuine concern. "This is an escalation, Ambassador. Are you sure this is the course you want to take?" The ambassador's gaze hardened. "I have no interest in escalation, but I also have no interest in losing our colony. Article 157 grants us the right to act in the defense of our citizens. We will not wait for the Council to bungle its way through another round of bureaucracy." An audible tension rippled through the room. The Council members had never heard anything quite like this before. The human delegation had, until now, been nothing more than a polite curiosity, a species more focused on diplomacy than military might. But the ambassador's actions, their words, suggested a very different humanity than the one the Council had welcomed into their fold. A humanity that wasn't waiting for permission. "I will proceed as Earth deems necessary," the ambassador declared, their voice steady, unwavering. "We have waited long enough." And with that, the true power of humanity, its quiet force, began to take shape. The Council was no longer in control of the narrative. As the session continued, the murmurs grew louder, the unease palpable. No one knew it yet, but the galaxy would soon realize what it meant when humanity's politeness shifted. And it was far from what they had imagined. The balance of power had begun to shift, and no one was prepared for the consequences. The council chamber, once buzzing with bureaucratic banter and indecision, now hummed with an uneasy tension. Representatives of all species had exchanged glances, the familiar rhythms of their deliberations shattered by the sudden force of the human ambassador's declaration. The room had taken on a quiet, almost reverential quality as the implications of the ambassador's words sank in. Premier Zolan's mandibles clicked nervously, his 17 eyes blinking in unison, attempting to process the unexpected shift in tone. He had never witnessed such a level of authority from a probationary member species. Earth had been invited into the council as a curiosity, a newcomer to galactic politics. But now, the human ambassador stood before them like a seasoned player who had been biding their time, waiting, calculating, and now revealing their hand. The representative from the Devar Commonwealth, an insectoid species with chitinous armor and piercing mandibles, shifted uncomfortably in their seat. "You are invoking Article 157 of the Membership Charter," they stated flatly. "This grants you the right to act unilaterally in defense of your citizens. But your actions, Ambassador, are not without consequence. The Council has rules." Ambassador Grix, the mole-rat-like representative of the Myrtle Confederacy, seemed to take a sharp interest in the exchange. "Yes, Ambassador," they said, their whiskers twitching. "And rules are something that can be bent, even broken, in times of true necessity. But remember, this council is not a mere collection of bureaucrats. We are the ruling body of the galaxy. You may have the right to invoke your emergency powers, but do you have the capacity to control what happens next?" The human ambassador's expression remained as neutral as ever, but a flicker of something cold passed behind their eyes. "Control?" they repeated, almost thoughtfully. "I'm not interested in control, Ambassador Grix. I'm interested in survival." Another ripple of unease flowed through the council. The humans' calm demeanor was still intact, but the undercurrent of force beneath their words was undeniable. The subtle threat of what they could do, what they would do if pushed further, had just become apparent. "Survival," Zolan repeated, his voice low and cautious. "You speak as though this anomaly, as you call it, is already a threat. But you have no proof of that. You cannot act on mere suspicion." The ambassador's gaze remained unwavering, their fingers lightly tapping the surface of their tablet. "I have the proof I need, Premier. The anomaly has been transmitting irregular energy signatures, far beyond the scope of any known natural phenomenon. And my sources, they added with the faintest trace of a smile. Tell me that it's more than just a passing celestial event. It's a weapon, a massive one. A cold silence fell over the council, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. The members exchanged glances, now fully aware that they were dealing with a species capable of wielding knowledge and force in ways they had not anticipated. "You speak with certainty, Ambassador," said Ambassador Trill of the photosynthetic Concord, their voice betraying a hint of suspicion. "But you've yet to offer any verifiable data. What you claim could just as easily be dismissed as paranoia." The human ambassador's eyes flicked over to the photosynthetic representative, their lips curling just slightly at the edges. "You would dismiss it, wouldn't you, Ambassador Trill?" they said smoothly. "After all, it's not your colony at risk, is it? You've never had to face the threat of something, or someone, bigger than your borders." Trill's chlorophyll flickered, a sign of agitation that the human ambassador didn't miss. The photosynthetic species was accustomed to a peaceful, slow-moving existence. They didn't understand humanity's readiness to act, to strike first and ask questions later. It was a mindset that felt foreign and, frankly, alarming. Premier Zolan held up his many appendages, signaling for silence. "This council was founded on diplomacy, not threats. You've made your point, Ambassador, but now I must ask, what do you propose we do about this situation?" The human ambassador's gaze narrowed, and for the first time the faintest hint of a smile crept across their lips. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that came right before a fight, the kind that preceded action. "I propose we stop sitting on our hands and take action. I've already submitted the necessary request to the Council's Security Division. If you're unwilling to move quickly enough, then I'll take the lead. No more waiting, no more committees." The silence that followed was heavy. The other representatives, once so eager to debate the finer points of galactic law, were now frozen, unable to shake the sense that the balance had irrevocably shifted. The human ambassador, who had been a mere curiosity when they first arrived, was now firmly in control of the narrative. "You've crossed the line, Ambassador," said the Devar representative, his voice strained with indignation. "You speak of unilateral action like it's your right to dictate terms to the galaxy. The Council does not answer to you." "No," the ambassador replied, their voice colder than the vacuum of space. "The Council does not answer to me, but you will answer to Earth if this situation escalates further." Their gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with each representative, one by one. "Make no mistake, humanity will not sit idly by. If it comes to that, we will defend ourselves, and when we act, we will do so decisively. We will not wait for you." A long, pregnant pause followed. The council members exchanged increasingly uneasy looks. In the face of this human ambassador, calm, cool, yet unyielding, they were confronted with something none of them had ever expected. A species that understood the value of diplomacy, but was more than willing to abandon it when survival was at stake. "Enough," Premier Zolan said at last, his voice low, carrying the weight of years of authority. "We will hold a vote. But know this, Ambassador, if you act without the Council's approval, there will be consequences." The ambassador didn't flinch. "Consequences are a risk I'm willing to take." And with that, the fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As the session continued, the human ambassador quietly sent out orders via their tablet, never breaking their stoic composure. Unseen by the Council, the gears of Earth's vast military apparatus were already set into motion. By the time the Council made its decision, it might already be too late. The human ambassador's final words echoed in the chamber, a quiet promise wrapped in the finality of truth. "If you don't act, we will, and we will win." The following days in the council chamber unfolded with a tense urgency that the council had never experienced before. Every species, from the towering arachnoid of Zolon's kind to the diminutive yet calculating minds of the Devar, found themselves in an unspoken stalemate. Despite the ambassador's brazen challenge, the council could not afford to openly break from protocol. Yet the truth lingered in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and undeniable. Humanity had crossed the Rubicon, and there was no turning back. In a desperate attempt to avoid an irreversible rift, Premier Zolon called for an emergency session, a last-ditch effort to stall the inevitable military escalation that loomed in the distance. The council chamber, once gleaming with its usual vibrancy, now felt cold, its crystal walls shifting to a pallid gray, mirroring the unease that had settled over the room. "Let us be clear," Zolon began, his voice more strained than it had ever been before. "This is not a matter of which species will stand victorious. It is a matter of survival for us all. We must consider the greater good." His mandibles clicked uneasily as his multiple eyes darted around the chamber, seeking support. This anomaly, as we have been told, poses an unprecedented risk. But what Ambassador Delta has proposed, acting outside council approval, sets a dangerous precedent. We cannot allow one species to assume such power. As he spoke, the human ambassador stood at their post, unmoving, a silent monolith of resolve. They didn't speak, didn't even glance up from their tablet, but their presence was more imposing than any of the council's arguments. The entire chamber could feel it. The pressure, the weight of humanity's readiness to act alone. They were done with diplomacy as usual. Done with the endless subcommittees, the layers of regulations. They were now a species that acted decisively, and they would not wait for a bloated, inefficient council to catch up. Ambassador Trill, always calm and composed in the face of turmoil, was the first to break the silence. Their green, chlorophyll-filled skin pulsed with anxiety. "We are not your enemies, Ambassador," they said, their voice echoing across the chamber. "But the way you are conducting yourself, it is a threat in itself. You will not be able to win the favor of the council by using forceful tactics. There are consequences to defying established norms, even for Earth." The human ambassador's eyes flicked upward at Trill, a spark of something almost imperceptible flashing in them. The smile was still there, but it had taken on a razor-sharp edge. "Consequences are a risk, Ambassador Trill," they replied smoothly, their voice carrying an undercurrent of something darker. "I've come to terms with that. But what I'm more concerned about is the cost of inaction. You would sit here and wait while our colony, with over 300,000 civilians, is potentially wiped out. You would let bureaucracy decide whether we live or die." A palpable shift occurred in the room. Several representatives flinched at the question, though none dared answer it outright. The images of Earth's recent military capabilities, revealed in their full, terrifying scope, lingered in everyone's mind. The Spectre-class vessels, the phase-cloaking technology, and the efficiency with which they had neutralized the massive alien anomaly. Humanity wasn't simply capable of defending itself. It was capable of reshaping the entire balance of power in this council, if they chose to. Ambassador Grix, who had remained silent for the duration of the conversation, shifted uncomfortably. "You would bring war to the council," they muttered under their breath, but loud enough for the chamber to hear. The human ambassador's voice cut through the murmur. "I'm not bringing war, Ambassador Grix. I'm ensuring peace. You and the rest of the council have been sitting on your hands for far too long. And I've watched as the council's ability to act has become more and more diluted by bureaucracy. We, humanity, have acted when it mattered. You could learn from that." Grix's whiskers twitched, and for a moment it seemed like they might argue, but then they fell silent again, glancing nervously at the others. In their hearts, they knew that the ambassador spoke a brutal truth. The council was slow, fractured, and filled with an exhausting amount of red tape. It couldn't move quickly when action was needed, and now humanity had taken the mantle of responsibility. But Zolan wasn't ready to concede. "We will vote on this, Ambassador," he said, his voice tight, as though forcing the words out. "But understand this. If we grant your request for unilateral action, there will be repercussions. The Council is the governing body of the galaxy, not one single planet, no matter how resourceful it may be." "We're all too aware of the Council's role, Premier," the human ambassador said softly, their gaze unwavering. "But you must understand that there are no more games to be played. The clock is ticking, and every second we waste gives that anomaly more time to reach our colony. Earth cannot wait, and neither will I." Zolan's mandibles clicked together in frustrated thought. The Council's established processes, the layers of red tape, and the endless paperwork, it was all coming apart at the seams. The Council had been built on consensus, but here, in this moment, there was no consensus to be found. The truth was that humanity had outgrown the Council's methods, its regulations, and its inability to act decisively. "We need to take a vote," Zolan said, his voice hollow with the weight of inevitability. With a deep breath, the chamber descended into the final stages of deliberation, but it was already clear what the outcome would be. The vote wasn't about who was right or wrong anymore. It was about who had the power to act. And humanity, with its advanced technology, unflinching resolve, and tactical brilliance, had shown they were ready to do what the Council could not, to protect their people, no matter the cost. The vote was taken swiftly, with no attempt to conceal the underlying tension. 17 representatives, each of them holding the fate of humanity and the galaxy in their hands, cast their votes. One by one they were tallied, and it became clear the majority was on Earth's side, though begrudgingly so. They had no choice but to allow humanity to act. The human ambassador remained silent as the results were announced, their expression unchanged. "I will begin preparations immediately," they said, their voice steady and resolute. Before Zolan could respond, the human's tablet buzzed with a new message. The ambassador glanced at it for a moment, then nodded once. "It seems the anomaly is already changing course," they said, their voice calm, but with a hint of urgency. "We'll need to move quickly." As the Council members left the chamber, there was an undeniable shift in the air, a sense that the galaxy had just entered a new phase, and that phase would be dictated not by the bureaucrats in the chamber, but by the pragmatic, decisive hands of humanity. The ambassador watched them leave, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. The Council would never be the same again. The vast, empty void of space held no regard for the debates or hesitations of the Galactic Unified Species Council. Outside the sterile confines of the Council chamber, humanity's Spectre-class response vessels, cloaked in the silent shroud of phase technology, moved swiftly toward Proxima Centauri 4. Each ship, perfectly synchronized with the others, cut through the dark, their very presence an ominous shadow in the galaxy's fold. The human ambassador, now firmly in command of the situation, sat in the heart of the command center aboard the flagship Seraphim, their fingers tapping with a quiet urgency across their tablet. A steady stream of data poured in from the colony, confirming what they had feared. The anomaly, no longer just a threat, had already shifted its trajectory, now heading straight for Proxima Centauri 4. It was moving faster, more aggressively than they had predicted. As the command center hummed with the flurry of preparations, the human ambassador stood. Their gaze, sharp and focused, scanned the various screens around them, each one flashing real-time images of the anomaly's approach. It was massive, stretching across the fabric of space itself, a pulsating, living thing that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its energy signature continued to grow, its purpose unclear, but its destructive potential undeniable. "We need to deploy the isolation field now," the ambassador ordered. Their voice carried the weight of someone who had already made the hard decision. There was no more room for hesitation. The Spectre-class ships, positioned in a perfect hexagonal formation, activated their weapons, their cloaking fields flickering briefly as they prepared for the first phase of engagement. One of the officers, a human tactical analyst, looked up from their console. "Ambassador, the Council has sent an emergency communique. They're requesting a delay until further scans can be conducted. They want more information before they proceed." The ambassador didn't even flinch. They didn't need to hear more. The Council had made their decision. Action had been taken out of their hands. The problem was no longer theirs to manage. It was humanity's. "Tell the Council," the ambassador replied coldly, "that the anomaly is already on a collision course with Proxima Centauri 4. Our civilians will be wiped out long before they can gather enough information to act. Tell them, too, that Earth is no longer waiting for permission." The officer hesitated for a moment, but then nodded, transmitting the message across the secure channel. The ambassador's mind was already far ahead of the situation. Humanity was moving alone now. They had the means to end this threat, but the galaxy would be watching, waiting to see whether humanity would become the hero or the aggressor. "Phase 1 of the plan is authorized," the ambassador said, their tone unyielding. "Activate the isolation field." The 6 Spectre-class ships activated their energy beams, creating a synchronized high-intensity field that enveloped the anomaly. It was a technique humanity had developed decades ago, designed to trap and contain cosmic objects of massive size. But this was something else entirely. The anomaly shuddered under the pressure, its exterior crackling with unknown energy as the field wrapped around it, squeezing in a tightening vice. For a moment, the command center fell silent as the anomaly's response was measured. The vast object began to convulse, sending ripples through space that disturbed the surrounding stars. It was no longer passive. It was fighting back. "Status report?" the ambassador asked, their eyes narrowed as the room held its breath. A young officer, clearly nervous but trying to maintain composure, looked up. "The isolation field is holding, but just barely. The energy fluctuations, we've never seen anything like this. It's as if the anomaly is adapting," the ambassador finished for them. They had known this would happen. The anomaly wasn't just an object. It was an intelligent, autonomous weapon of some kind, and now it was learning, evolving, trying to escape the field. The ambassador's expression hardened. They hadn't expected the anomaly to be so advanced, so far beyond the capabilities of anything humanity had ever encountered. But they had come prepared. Humanity's own advanced technologies were now their greatest asset, and they would use them all to ensure the safety of their people. "Phase 2, the ambassador ordered. "We need to activate the gravitational destabilizers, crank the energy to maximum." The Seraphim's systems hummed as the destabilizers activated, sending out a massive shock wave designed to interfere with the anomaly's gravitational field. It was a tactic borrowed from humanity's own scientific studies, a method of manipulating space-time on a microscopic scale to cause structural collapse. The anomaly groaned, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the very fabric of space. A surge of energy flared from the core of the anomaly, brighter than any star, and for a moment, the ships in formation flickered in and out of visibility as the energy surged outward in every direction. "We're losing control!" someone shouted from the comm station. "The destabilizers are pushing the anomaly's core into a higher energy state. It's unstable." The human ambassador's grip on their tablet tightened as they issued a command with chilling precision. "Initiate Phase 3. Now." Phase 3 was humanity's final option, a last resort measure that they had hoped never to use. It would compress the anomaly into a subspace pocket, removing it from the fabric of the universe entirely, an action that could tear apart the very space-time continuum if it went wrong. The ship's weapons fired in unison, creating a massive energy burst that hit the anomaly's core. It was unlike anything seen before. A blinding, otherworldly flash of light lit up the command center, blurring the edges of reality itself. The gravitational destabilizers, now at full power, created a rippling effect that seemed to tear apart space around the anomaly. A violent distortion spread through the sector, warping the stars and planets in its path. The anomaly convulsed, its form collapsing in on itself, folding into a pocket of compressed space. Time itself seemed to stretch and distort, but slowly the phenomenon began to shrink. With each passing second, it became smaller, more contained, until finally it was gone. The room fell silent. "Status report," the ambassador said, voice unwavering despite the gravity of the situation. The officer at the console glanced nervously at the screens before looking up. "The anomaly has been successfully neutralized. There are no signs of further destabilization. The sector is clear." The human ambassador stood motionless, their eyes scanning the data, then turned toward the comms officer. "Alert the colony. The threat is neutralized. I want all civilian communications restored immediately." As the officers in the command center moved to carry out their orders, the ambassador stood still for a moment, staring out into the endless void of space. Humanity had acted decisively, without hesitation. But there was something more at play here. Something beyond just survival. This was the galaxy's wake-up call. For the first time in centuries, the Council would have to reckon with the fact that humanity had not only survived, but emerged stronger than they had ever imagined. And now the Council would have to ask themselves, could they continue to ignore humanity's power? Or would they, at long last, acknowledge the shift in the balance of the galaxy? The ambassador allowed themselves a moment of quiet satisfaction. Whatever came next, humanity had already proven its place in the stars, and it wasn't going to let anyone forget it. The cold silence of space held its breath. For a brief moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The anomaly that had threatened humanity's colony was gone, vanquished with precise, calculated force. Yet, in the depths of the void, something had shifted, something deeper than the galaxy's physical balance. Inside the command center of Seraphim, the human ambassador stood motionless, watching as the screens flickered with data. The mission had been successful, but at what cost? The anomaly was neutralized, but the larger questions now loomed large. What would the Council do next? And how would humanity be seen after this? The ambassador turned away from the screens and addressed the room. "Prepare for debriefing," they ordered. "We'll notify the Council of the successful neutralization, but I want a full report on the tactical execution of Phase 3. We need to be ready for their response." "Yes, Ambassador," came the chorus of voices, and officers immediately began to scramble, analyzing the data, ensuring that every last bit of information was logged and recorded. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council members sat in a different kind of silence. The emergency session had reconvened on a secure channel, the results of the vote still fresh in their minds. While humanity had acted unilaterally, the Council's approval had been begrudgingly given. But now the aftermath was settling in. The decision to grant Earth the authority to act had not been unanimous, and several Council members, particularly those from more traditional or militaristic species, were already growing uneasy with the outcome. Premier Zolan, the arachnoid leader, paced slowly in his chambers, mandibles clicking with agitation. The vote had been a formality, but what came next? The galaxy's power structures had been irrevocably altered, and Zolan knew it. The very species they had once considered a backwater was now a force to be reckoned with, one that could no longer be dismissed. And worse, humanity's decisiveness had exposed the Council's own paralysis. "They did what we could not," murmured Ambassador Trill of the photosynthetic Concord, watching as the screen flashed with the reports from Earth. "They acted swiftly, effectively. The anomaly is gone. But at what cost?" countered Ambassador Grix of the Myrtile Confederacy, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding reality. Humanity's methods may be effective, but they are unsettling, unpredictable. What happens when they choose to act against another member species? The words hung in the air. It was a question that none of the council members had truly been forced to ask before. The idea of a species acting with such power, unbound by the council's dilatory processes, was a new and dangerous precedent. What would prevent humanity from using their military capabilities as leverage if they were dissatisfied with the council's decisions in the future? "We can't ignore them," Premier Zolon said, a note of finality in his voice. "The human ambassador's actions have proven that. We have no choice but to acknowledge their power, and we must decide how to integrate them into the Council's framework before they decide they no longer need us." The room was filled with murmurs. The discussion had shifted from one of policy and diplomacy to one of survival. How would the Council adjust to the new dynamic? How could they coexist with a species that could reshape the galaxy with a single, decisive move? Back aboard Seraphim, the ambassador sat alone in their quarters, staring out at the distant stars. The quiet after the storm was unnerving. The mission was over. The colony was safe. But there was no sense of victory, only a quiet acknowledgement that the galaxy was no longer the same place it had been only a few days before. The ambassador's thoughts drifted to the Council's future response. They had already shown their hand, and Earth would never again be viewed as a passive player in galactic politics. But even as the ambassador considered the future, there was something else beneath the surface. A gnawing, quiet realization that the Council's bureaucratic failures had set the stage for this very moment. Humanity had acted because the Council had failed to do so. "We were forced into it," the ambassador whispered, the words slipping from their lips like a confession. It was a truth they had not fully allowed themselves to acknowledge until now. Humanity had acted because it had no choice. They had acted because waiting for permission had already cost too much. A message beeped on the ambassador's tablet, pulling them out of their thoughts. It was a communiqué from the Council. The ambassador read it carefully, their expression unreadable. It was a formal acknowledgement of the successful neutralization of the anomaly, but beneath the politeness, the undertones were clear. The Council had agreed to meet with humanity to discuss their future role and integration, but there was no doubt. This was a formality. They needed to come to terms with humanity's new place in the galaxy. The implications were far-reaching, and neither side fully understood what the future would hold. The ambassador set the tablet down, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily upon them. The galaxy was changing. There would be no going back. The Council would either adapt to the new reality or be swept aside, and humanity would be ready for whatever came next. As the lights dimmed in their quarters, the ambassador looked once more out at the stars, the void stretching infinitely before them. There were no easy answers, but there was one certainty. Humanity had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it had a place in the stars, and that place would be earned, not given. The galaxy had underestimated them once. They would not make that mistake again. And for the first time, the ambassador allowed themselves to smile, not the diplomatic mask they had perfected, but something genuine, sharp, and resolute. It was only the beginning.